right, so we're back to groupthink and this tendency to go along with the group, even when you disagree with them. That's the thing I really want to emphasize about groupthink is that even if you disagree, you aren't going to speak up if you're experiencing groupthink. So what makes us do that? Why don't we speak up? Well, one reason is one of the antecedents, one of the things that leads into it is cohesion. If you have a highly cohesive group, nobody wants to be the one to rock the boat. So this is one of those situations when I mentioned that a highly cohesive group, um, if they've got low task orientation, they may not do well, things like that. Cohesion can actually interfere with our ability to make a good decision because we don't want to annoy or bother our peers. We don't want them to think less of us. And so we go along. Maybe we don't know about other dissenting opinions. Like I said on the last section, we have a tendency to only talk about the shared information. And so any evidence that the shared information is wrong is often not offered. And so we don't know that there are other dissenting opinions and that we might think we're the only ones holding the dissenting opinion. We think this is unshared information that we're holding when in fact a lot of people might be actually thinking the same thing, but everybody's falling prey to the same norm to just not disrupt. And so they don't say anything. And so we don't share that dissenting information. If you have a really strong leader of maybe a leader that has a bias already in place where they're leaning one direction, or maybe they don't even say it, but we know that's their tendency because we know our leader well enough that we know, well, I know what they would like to do. This is what they typically do. So I don't want to say something different. That strong leader will make the decision, and it's up to us to just sort of support it. If there's high decisional stress, if you feel like you have to make the decision right now, that something bad will happen if we don't just make a decision now. I think that's what led into some bad decisions surrounding COVID is that there was this like, if we don't make a decision and lock everybody down and not let people out of their houses, then, millions of people are going to die. And they had that pressure on them to do something. And so that's what they came up with is lock us all in our houses for 2 weeks, then 6 weeks. Then for some of us, I didn't get to really come out of my house and start teaching again for a year and a half. So high decisional stress sometimes can lead to poor decisions because it feels like we should just make what appears to be safest decision, right? Make the decision that seems like would have the fewest bad outcomes, and a lot of them we can't think of right now because we're so worried about the other dire outcome. So high decisional stress. If you don't do this change in the way the organization is working, we're not going to be able to get our public offering out, and we're going to lose all this money. And oh no, and high decisional stress. You can tell that a group is experiencing groupthink, or that you within a group might be experiencing groupthink, if the group seems to have a sense that they can make decisions and that nothing bad will really come to them. That's what I mean by belief in invulnerability. That even if we make a decision that tells millions of people they have to stay home for at least 2 weeks, it's not going to really harm us, and it seems like it won't harm them. I can't think of how it would harm them, and so it seems like the safest thing to do. It's a fine thing to do. I feel like nothing bad could come from that. If we believe that everybody is in agreement, if we think everybody agrees, we feel more powerful, less vulnerable to any bad outcomes. And so we think everybody, and so if we think everybody in the group is honestly saying yes, then we feel like we're making a good decision, even if it's not a good decision. Another symptom that a group is experiencing groupthink is if anybody tries to raise dissent, you put pressure on them to get them to be quiet. Again, I want you to, if you're old enough to remember this, think back to 2020. And if you were on social media, if anybody raised any concerns about, being locked down, or whether masks work or not work, or whether we should be allowed to have gatherings, or if anybody raised any doubts about what the protocols were, people on social media would apply pressure to them and tell them what a denier they are, or what a bad person they are, or other things to get them to get in line. Either be quiet, so now we can believe everybody's unanimous, or get in line. Like, we're trying to educate you so that you'll know that you're wrong. And that's what we do to dissenters. And maybe the dissenters aren't wrong. In the example of COVID, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know. But in a group setting, even when the dissenter is right, a lot of times we'll put pressure on them to just get in line. Either be quiet so we can think there's unanimity, or believe what we're saying because we believe we're right. And then there's appointing a mind guard. So this is where the group might actually overtly, or sort of by accident, assign somebody to be in charge of sort of finding out what other people are saying about what the group's doing. In politics, they call it polling, right? Let's find out what the public thinks about this. And we want to know so we can get out ahead of it. And in groups, we sometimes will do that. Like if you're working within a group, within an organization, there might be a mind guard whose job it is to let the group know if they're sort of get discontent about what the group's doing, or something like that. If you've got a mind guard who's reporting back to you whether people are happy or unhappy with what you're doing, that's a really good sign that this is a group that's mired in groupthink. They don't want to hear any contradictory ideas. They just want to make sure that their message is getting out. So these are some pretty good symptoms of groupthink. If you ever see this in one of your groups, it might be a good time to say, I think I'm going to have to start being a dissenter and stand up to the pressure, because this is starting to become a group. So, all right. Work teams in the 21st century. They have changed over the past 50 years. 50 years ago, you'd be in your little cubicle doing your work by yourself, and you're like a little cog in the larger system. Today, I haven't got to today yet. I forgot about my teamwork. When there were teams, it was usually single discipline. So you would have a work group of the accountants all working on this accounting project, or you'd have the work group of the marketers all working on this marketing project. Or at school, we would have single discipline teams doing research, and everybody on the team is a psychologist. You would never bring in somebody from another field. That is less common today. Today we have we include those alone work and single discipline stuff. Of course, those are still how will that ever go away? But cross-discipline teamwork has become a lot more common. So now we have a group that includes the accountant, an accountant maybe, a marketer maybe, maybe one of the sales team, like that. You pull it together with people from different perspectives so that you're not sort of, the accountants now come and tell us what the answer is, and all the other disciplines have to just conform, right? So cross-discipline work has gotten to be a lot more common. I know in academia it has. It's much more common to have publications where people are not all in one field anymore and things like that, because it's inspiring. And there's a lot of overlap among different disciplines. So it makes a lot of sense that there would be cross-discipline teamwork, right? And it's good to know what other aspects of the organization are doing, and what shared knowledge there is, and what specific knowledge that comes from their discipline. It's very invigorating to have that kind of setup. Now, when the alone work or the single discipline teamwork is occurring, it might be self-managed. It might have a supervisor overseeing it. It could go either way. It might be functional to have single discipline teamwork. Might be functional where you have a supervisor in the group, and then their direct reports are in that group. And so it's really maybe a unit more so than what you would call a group, because it's the supervisor and their direct reports. So some of these things kind of overlap with other concepts. Either type of team might be virtual these days, right? You don't have to be in the same room. So you might even, in your cross-discipline or your single-discipline teamwork, be pulling people in from the other branch offices, or from your other, country locations where your organization appears and stuff like that. So no longer do you have to fly there and get in the same room and so on. So collaboration has become the buzzword of the 21st century. This is where two or more people are engaged in interaction with each other on some kind of common goal. So they're collaborating. They're putting their, ideally two people or more working together is going to produce more power than one person working alone is the premise. Collaboration is very common in the workplace these days. And then work teams are the work groups in which the actions of individuals are interdependent and coordinated, and each member has a role and the team has common goals and objectives. So the same thing as, a regular group. And so these two styles have become more popular. I think a lot of people are disappointed though when they leave college and they enter the workforce and they do a lot of alone work. And they're like, what happened to all the collaboration and stuff I thought I was being taught? I thought this was the new wave of the 21st century. But a lot of work is done by yourself still, even, in the modern era. All right, mental models. Making a little bit of a pivot here. Mental models are organized knowledge structures that we carry around in our heads and that we have formed as a function of our experience in the world. I apologize, my head is blocking the word mental, but that says mental models. And they are organized knowledge structures that we carry around in our heads. These mental models allow us to make sense of our world. We take what we have experienced before and compare it to what we're experiencing now, and that allows us to make sense in the world. We use our mental models to describe things. A lot of times we'll use little hedge words when we're using our mental model to explain something. Like, for example, when I was a little kid and my friend had a microwave oven, we didn't have one yet. And I was like, how did you put a burrito on a paper plate and it came out hot, but the plate didn't burn? I'm so perplexed. And so my friend used her mental model to help explain to me what just happened. And she said, it's kind of like an oven that doesn't get hot. I was like, you're gonna have to explain that better. And she goes, well, for some reason, it only makes the food hot. It doesn't interact with the thing that the food is on, which is not completely true because the plate can get hot. But I mean, give her credit, she was 12. So that kind of hedge where you're like, it's sort of like, is evidence that you're using a mental model to try and describe something or explain something. We also use mental models to help us to predict other people's attitudes, other people's behaviors based on either our knowledge of that person in other circumstances or our knowledge of other people like them in similar situations. So it could be the actual person has given us the information to help us make a decision about them now, but more commonly, it's somebody else that we've had experience with in the past that we're now projecting onto our current teammate. So that's a good opportunity for some bias, isn't it? Now, a shared mental model is when the members of a group kind of start to meld into one kind of group mental model, right? So we use our own knowledge and our own understanding to choose behaviors that are consistent with our teammates' behaviors, and we start to get into alignment, into synchrony, right, as we're working with our teammates. And that's because we're starting to look at the problem or the team through the same lens. So, types of work teams or groups. We have production teams, employees who produce something. Management teams, people who coordinate workers to ensure production. Service teams who work together to attend to customers' needs. Project teams that are brought together just for the purpose of a specific project. And then advisory teams, which are teams that are put together to work in parallel with any of these production processes, to give advice about any of these things. So we have different kinds of work teams that might have different problems that they're going to deal with, and probably vastly different solutions based on the subject matter that they're working with. All right, I think that's a good time to break. Let's come back and talk about self-managed work teams in the next video.